Remember when Tommy Hilfiger was considered streetwear? As hard as it is to believe today, there actually was a moment in history where preppy looking polo shirts, khakis, and sweater vests were embraced by street culture. In the early to mid 90s, you could find Tommy in rap videos, worn by hustlers on the street, and in just about every school around the country. You were considered a fashion bum if you didn't have at least a few pieces in your collection, put it that way. At the time, the brand offered bright, bold, and flashy apparel, things that perfectly caught the attention of an aspirational youth around the world, helping to catapult Tommy Hilfiger into fashion's history books as a legacy icon. But these days, not so much. But why? How did a brand created by a guy from Elmira, New York, that's upstate for those that didn't know, and has no knowledge of street culture whatsoever, become one of the hottest brands in the hood for nearly a decade, only to fall off and relegate itself back to its original origins? Well, let's find out. I'm Nate the Great from TakeFlight214.com, and this is the history of Tommy Hilfiger, how Preppy became hip-hop's favorite brand. But as usual, before we get started, please take a second to stop and hit that like button for us, considering it's really the only way that YouTube recognizes channels and promote them. We recently crossed the 25,000 sub mark last week, and now we're in pursuit of 30K. We can't do it without you guys' help, so go ahead, smash that button for us, and if you want to help out in other ways, don't forget to stop by our website where you can find hundreds of pop culture related pieces and apparel. But with all that being said and out of the way, let's dive into this story. The legacy of Tommy Hilfiger, the brand, all starts in the 70s with Tommy Hilfiger, the guy. Back then, a teenage Tommy ran into issues finding pieces that fit his personal style and that of his friends. He spent time scouring New York for his favorite fashion looks, and once he found them, he would turn around and sell some to his friends. Soon, he realized he was onto something. He could finally combine his love for fashion with his need to make money. And at the age of 20, he opened his first store, the People's Place. A ballsy move for a kid with no real business experience, and it eventually led to him making a few mistakes that wound to the business filing bankruptcy 6 years later. But rather than dwell on the failure, he used it as a learning experience for his next endeavor. But his big break came when he met Mohan Majaran a few years later. Mohan was an Indian textile bigwig who wanted to expand into menswear. With his backing, Tommy was able to launch his first iteration of the brand, and with that, Tommy Hilfiger Corporation was born. They launched their signature menswear collection in 1985, featuring classic takes on the preppy style, paired with a youthful attitude. The brand took all kinds of risks, and some of them didn't always work out, but they still managed to achieve relative success in the first 10 years. Much of this success was due to the fact that it was built by an American-grown talent, something that was a bit of change of pace from all the European designers. By the early 90s, the brand had amassed a vast national presence, going public in 1992, giving them even more financial backing. But another interesting thing happened for Tommy in the early 90s as well. Hip-hop artists and their fans adopted it and made the brand their own. Hilfiger's initial boom in popularity started with Brand Nubian's frontman, Grand Puba, who began rocking the apparel and rapping about it on his records. After rapping about the brand on Mary J. Blige's What's the 411, Tommy got his first, and most important in my opinion, form of cultural capital, a hip-hop cosign. Tommy Hilfiger was gaining steam heading into the 90s. But the defining moment for the brand came in 1994 when Snoop Dogg wore Tommy Hilfiger rugby during his SNL performance. This one moment stamped Tommy Hilfiger as a culturally relevant brand, worn by one of the most popular rappers at that time. According to the head of the marketing of Tommy Hilfiger, after Snoop wore this rugby sweater, it sold out everywhere the very next day. Andy Hilfiger, Tommy's brother, realized after Grand Puba in the 80s and Snoop Dogg in the 90s that there was something special with hip-hop. And while other brands didn't get it, Andy saw this as a moment to make headway by suiting rappers in Hilfiger gear, and inviting them to runway shows and other events. Sidebar: did you know that Tommy Hilfiger has his very own Mandela effect phenomenon? A rumor was sparked that Tommy Hilfiger went on record on Oprah Winfrey's show, no less, and stated that, quote, if he knew that blacks and Latinos would adopt his clothes, he would have never designed them in the first place. I even remember hearing this myself, but fact is, it never happened. Both Tommy and Oprah have later gone on record stating that the interview never took place and said sentiments were untrue. And actually, whereas brands like Ralph Lauren's Polo truly did shy away from hip-hop communities, Tommy, on the other hand, embraced it. By 1997, Hilfiger spread everywhere. Another star to don the brand was R&B singer Aaliyah. She loved the aesthetic of the baggy clothes look that was popping at the time, and it was very much on brand with her style of music. And hearing this, Tommy was elated. He signed Aaliyah as a model and spokesman and even did a now classic commercial spot with her. Later, TLC wore Tommy on the Kids' Choice Awards, and even Destiny's Child could be seen rocking the brand. Aaliyah's campaign ultimately led to Tommy Hilfiger creating a women's line known as Tommy Girl, which further cemented them in the culture. From 92 to about 98 or so, Tommy was at the top of the heap. Sure, there were brands more attached to the culture that had come out too, brands like FUBU, Fat Form, and the like. But throughout that time, Tommy ran right alongside with them. I remember when I was a kid, everyone in school who proclaimed to be fly had some Tommy Hilfiger in the mix. I remember spending hours sleuthing through Dillard's and Foley's looking for Tommy, Nautica, and Polo gems. Even though I also was a fan of Polo and Nautica, I always thought that Tommy had more flashy, standout looks at the time, and that was what I was going for. But little did anyone know, change was coming. Remember that rumor that I told you about earlier? Well, it came out in 1997, and although we now know that it's most likely untrue, at the time, people believed it. So much so that they began to shun the brand and lean towards the more culture-based stuff of the day. This couldn't have happened at a worse time for Tommy, because as the 90s rolled into the 2000s, a new fashion genre was coming into being, knocking on the door as such. Say it with me, guys. Streetwear was born as we know it today. Fans of the channel know that when OG streetwear brands hit the scene in about 2005 or so, they muscled out many of the older proto brands from the space. One of them being Tommy Hilfiger. On top of that, Tommy Hilfiger had oversaturated the market. The brand's exclusivity faded as it flooded discount stores, making it less desirable. By the mid-2000s, Tommy Hilfiger was no longer a streetwear staple. It was struggling. Suddenly, Tommy had fallen out of favor with trendsetters and seemed like just another has-been relic. But wait, they still had their original core base to turn to. Instead of chasing trends, Tommy started embracing its classic aesthetic again, only this time it felt fresh. With major collabs like Tommy by Gigi Hadid collections and returning to the bold 90s inspired designs, the brand managed to find its way back. Even in streetwear, Tommy's vintage 90s pieces became grails, reselling for tons of money on the resale market. The resurgence of 90s nostalgia put classic Tommy back in the spotlight. Hilfiger's journey from preppy Americana to streetwear icon to comeback king is a pretty wild one. The brand's ability to adapt and embrace hip-hop culture and reinvent itself kept it relevant for nearly 40 years. Something that I've often questioned why other more tapped-in streetwear brands have been unable to do. And for that reason alone, and nostalgia of course, I say Tommy Hilfiger will always have a place in street fashion history. But what do you think? Were you a fan of Tommy Hilfiger back in the day? Why do you think that they've been able to have such longevity whereas other brands have not? Hit us in the comment section and let us know. And if you made it all the way through and enjoy videos like this, don't forget to hit the like button. Liking and sharing these videos is the only way to get the YouTube algorithms to notice and promote us. And if you want to be updated whenever we drop a new episode, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be reminded when they release. With all that being said, I'm Nate the Great from TakeFlight214.com, signing out. Until next time, peace.